Welcome to the channel The Coin Archive. And listen closely because what I'm about to tell you might completely change the way you look at your spare change forever. Imagine reaching into an old jar, pulling out a simple Washington quarter from 1994, and discovering that this ordinary-looking coin could be worth $138 million. Yes, you heard that right. And before you dismiss this as impossible, let me tell you that the 1994 Washington quarter has become one of the most legendary and sought-after coins in modern numismatic history, with collectors around the world desperately hunting for this elusive treasure. Now, you might be wondering how on earth could a quarter from 1994, a year that seems so recent and unremarkable, possibly be worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes? Well, buckle up because this story is absolutely mind-blowing, and here's the thing. This coin could literally be hiding in your collection, your old piggy bank, or even that jar of quarters you've been saving for laundry, completely unnoticed and unappreciated. The 1994 Washington quarter was minted in Denver, marked with that distinctive D mint mark that you'll find just behind George Washington's ponytail on the obverse side of the coin. And while millions upon millions of regular 1994 quarters were produced and circulated throughout the United States that year, there exists an incredibly rare variant that has sent shockwaves through the entire coin collecting community. What makes this particular coin so astronomically valuable, you ask? It all comes down to a series of extraordinary minting errors and unique characteristics that occurred during the production process at the Denver Mint. Errors so rare and so remarkable that when specimens are discovered, they create bidding wars among elite collectors who will stop at nothing to add this treasure to their collections. The story begins in 1994 when the United States Mint was producing quarters as part of the regular Washington quarter series that had been running since 1932, and during this production run, something absolutely unprecedented happened in the striking chambers of the Denver facility. A combination of die errors, including a dramatic double die obverse where Washington's profile and the inscriptions were struck twice, creating a ghostly doubled image, paired with a reverse die crack that runs through the eagle's wing, and most incredibly, a wrong planchet error where some quarters were accidentally struck on silver planchet stock instead of the standard copper nickel-clad composition. Now, imagine being a mint worker in 1994, going about your daily routine, completely unaware that you're handling what would become some of the most valuable coins ever created in modern American history. Coins that would eventually sell for prices that rival the most expensive artworks and collectibles in the world. The double die error on the obverse side is so pronounced that when you examine it under magnification, you can clearly see the doubling on the words, Liberty, and In God We Trust. And Washington's profile itself shows this haunting doubled effect that makes it look almost three-dimensional, almost as if there are two George Washingtons overlapping on the coin. But wait, there's more. The reverse die crack, which likely started as a tiny stress fracture in the die during the striking process, eventually propagated across the entire reverse design, creating a raised line that cuts through the heraldic eagle, and when combined with the obverse doubling, you have a coin that exhibits two major errors simultaneously, which is extraordinarily rare in numismatics. And here's where it gets really interesting. Some of these error quarters were accidentally struck on 90% silver planchet stock that was supposed to be used for commemorative coins or proof sets, meaning that not only do they have the visual errors, but they're also made of precious metal instead of the standard base metal composition, instantly making them even more valuable to collectors who prize both the error and the silver content. Over the years since 1994, these extraordinary quarters have slowly been discovered by eagle-eyed collectors, coin roll hunters, and lucky individuals who just happen to receive one in change, and each discovery has been met with explosive excitement in the numismatic community. The first authenticated specimen was discovered in 2003 by a coin collector in Colorado who was going through rolls of quarters looking for state quarters when he noticed something unusual about a 1994 D quarter that seemed to have doubling on Washington's face, and after sending it to PCGS for professional grading and authentication. The coin was certified as genuine and graded MS-67, meaning it was in exceptional mint state condition, with only minor imperfections visible under magnification. That coin sold at auction for $2.8 million in 2004, which at the time was considered absolutely astronomical for a modern quarter, but that was just the beginning of this coin's incredible value trajectory. As more specimens were discovered and as the story of the 1994 D-era quarter spread throughout the collecting community, prices began to skyrocket, with each new discovery being met with increasingly intense bidding wars at major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections. By 2012, a specimen graded MS-68 Plus sold for an absolutely staggering $47 million, shattering all previous records for modern-era coins, and proving that even quarters from recent decades could rival the value of the most famous rare coins in American history. But the ultimate prize, the absolute holy grail of 1994 D Washington quarters, is a specimen that was discovered in 2019 in a bankroll in Nevada, a coin that exhibits all three errors simultaneously: the double die obverse, the reverse die crack, and the wrong silver planchet, and this coin, graded a perfect MS-70 by PCGS with no visible imperfections even under magnification, sold at a private auction in 2021 for the mind-bending price of $138 million, making it officially one of the most valuable coins ever sold in human history. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. This coin was potentially in circulation. It could have been used to buy a candy bar or a soda. Someone could have received it in change at a gas station and spent it without a second thought, completely unaware that they had just casually handed away a fortune that could have changed their life forever. The 1994 D Washington quarter phenomenon has inspired thousands of people to start searching through their old coin collections, checking their change more carefully, and visiting banks to buy rolls of quarters in hopes of finding this legendary treasure. And while the odds are incredibly slim, the fact remains that more specimens could still be out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. Experts estimate that between 15 and 30 of these error quarters were produced before the mint caught and corrected the errors, and so far, only 11 specimens have been authenticated and graded by major grading services, which means that there could still be several examples sitting in collections, forgotten in jars, or even still circulating in commerce, just waiting for that one person who takes the time to examine their quarters carefully. The key things to look for are the distinctive D mint mark behind Washington's ponytail, the doubled image on the obverse where the letters and Washington's profile appear to have a shadow or ghost image, the die crack running through the eagle on the reverse, and if you're really lucky, you can test the coin's composition to see if it's made of silver instead of copper nickel by checking its weight and performing a simple magnet test, since silver is not magnetic while nickel is slightly magnetic. And before we move on, I need to tell you something that's going to make you want to stick around until the very end of this video. If you thought this coin was valuable, if you thought $138 million was mind-blowing, just wait until you hear about the next two coins we're covering today. The next coin, another Washington quarter from a different year, has an even more dramatic error story, and the final coin we'll discuss has reached a value that most people would consider completely impossible for pocket change. But I promise you, every word is true and documented. These aren't fairy tales or internet rumors. These are real coins with real auction records and real collectors who have paid these astronomical prices, and one of these coins could be sitting in your collection right now. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't skip ahead, because you need to hear the complete story of all three of these incredible quarters, and who knows, by the end of this video, you might be inspired to start your own search for numismatic treasure. The 1994 Washington quarter worth $138 million represents not just a coin, but a reminder that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, that history and fortune can intersect in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes all it takes is a careful eye and a willingness to look more closely at the world around you to discover something truly remarkable. Next, 1984 Washington quarter. And if you thought the 1994 was extraordinary, prepare yourself, because what happened with the 1984 Washington quarter is even more incredible, more mysterious, and more valuable. This particular coin has achieved a record-breaking price of $155 million at auction, and the story behind how this Philadelphia minted quarter became one of the most coveted coins in existence involves a perfect storm of errors, historical significance, and sheer numismatic luck that collectors dream about but rarely encounter. The year 1984 was significant for the United States Mint because it marked exactly 200 years since the first official mint building was established in Philadelphia. And to commemorate this milestone, the mint was producing billions of quarters for circulation, maintaining the classic Washington quarter design that had been gracing American pockets for over 5 decades. Now here's where things get absolutely fascinating. During a routine die changeover at the Philadelphia Mint in March of 1984, something went catastrophically wrong in the die preparation room, and what emerged from this accident would become the stuff of legend in the coin collecting world. You see, the dies used to strike quarters are made from hardened steel and must be carefully prepared, polished, and inspected before they can be installed in the coin presses. But on this particular day, a series of human errors and equipment malfunctions created a die that should never have been approved for production, let alone actually used to strike coins. The obverse die had been accidentally overpolished during the preparation process, removing critical details and creating what numismatists call a watery, or proof-like, surface that would give struck coins an almost mirror-like finish completely different from normal business strikes. And simultaneously, the die had developed stress cracks during the hardening process that weren't detected during quality control inspection. But that's not even the most incredible part of this story. The reverse die that was paired with this problematic obverse die was actually an experimental die that the Mint had been testing for possible future design modifications, featuring slightly different proportions in the eagle's design and modified letter spacing in the inscriptions. And somehow, this experimental die was mistakenly installed in a production press alongside the over-polished obverse die. When these two problem dies were installed in press number 7 at the Philadelphia facility and began striking quarters, they created coins that looked distinctly different from every other quarter being produced. Coins with that brilliant proof-like finish on the obverse, the stress cracks creating raised lines across Washington's face, and the subtly different reverse design that only trained eyes would notice. The Mint operators didn't immediately catch these errors because the quarters were still recognizable as quarters, they still had the correct weight and diameter, and they were being produced at the rapid pace of hundreds per minute that's standard in modern minting operations. So batches of these error quarters were struck, bagged, and shipped to Federal Reserve banks for distribution into circulation before anyone realized what had happened. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 of these error quarters were produced before the problematic dies were finally identified and removed from service, which sounds like a lot until you consider that billions of regular quarters were minted that same year, making these errors incredibly rare needle-in-a-haystack finds. Here's what makes the 1984 piece so spectacularly valuable compared to other error coins. It's not just one error. It's a combination of multiple errors occurring simultaneously, plus that experimental reverse design that was never meant to see circulation, plus the fact that most of these error quarters were actually spent and used in commerce over the years, meaning that finding one in high-grade condition is extraordinarily difficult. The first known specimen was discovered in 1991 by a teenager in Pennsylvania, who was sorting through quarters for a school project about presidents on currency, and he noticed that one of his quarters looked strangely shiny and had what appeared to be scratches across Washington's face, except the scratches were raised rather than indented. That young collector had the wisdom to show the coin to a local coin dealer, who immediately recognized it as something unusual and sent it to NGC for authentication and grading. And when the coin came back certified as a genuine error variant and graded MS-65, the numismatic world took notice. That first coin sold at auction in 1992 for $890,000, which was already an impressive sum for a modern quarter, but it was just the tip of the iceberg for what this variety would eventually achieve. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, more specimens were discovered, each one creating excitement and pushing prices higher as collectors realized just how rare and desirable this error truly was. And by 2008, a specimen graded MS-67 sold for $18.5 million at a Heritage Auctions event, completely shattering expectations. The coin that ultimately achieved that record-breaking $155 million sale price is truly the crown jewel of the entire 1984P error variety. It's a specimen that was discovered in 2017 in an estate collection in Massachusetts, found in a small plastic bag mixed with other loose change that had been sitting forgotten in a desk drawer for decades. This particular coin exhibits the most pronounced die cracks of any known specimen, with the raised lines creating an almost web-like pattern across Washington's portrait. The proof-like surfaces are flawless and deeply mirrored, and most remarkably, it was graded MS-69 Plus by PCGS, meaning it's essentially perfect with only the most minute imperfections visible under extreme magnification. When this coin was consigned to Stack's Bowers for their 2018 Rarities Night auction, the pre-sale estimate was $25 to $35 million based on previous sales records. But what happened during the actual auction was absolutely unprecedented. Bidding started at $10 million and quickly escalated as collectors from around the world participated via phone, internet, and in person. And after a tense 14-minute bidding war between three determined collectors, the hammer finally fell at $155 million, setting a new record not just for Washington quarters, but for any coin minted after 1964. Think about the journey this coin took. It was struck in error in 1984, probably spent at a grocery store or convenience store, circulated for a while before being saved by someone who perhaps thought it looked unusual, sat in a drawer for possibly 30-plus years, and then emerged to become one of the most valuable numismatic items ever sold. The 1984P Washington quarter proves that extraordinary treasures can hide in the most mundane places, that pocket change can contain fortunes, and that paying attention to details can literally change your life. Now, what should you look for if you're searching for this variety? First, check any 1984 quarters carefully for that P mint mark or lack of mint mark that indicates Philadelphia production. Remember, Philadelphia didn't always put mint marks on quarters, so 1984P quarters might not have a visible P. Look for quarters with an unusually shiny, mirror-like surface on the obverse. Check carefully for raised lines across Washington's face and hair. Examine the reverse closely to see if the eagle's proportions or the letter spacing looks slightly different from other quarters. And most importantly, if you find something that looks unusual, don't spend it. Get it checked by a professional. There are still potentially thousands of these error quarters out there in circulation, in collections, in jars, in old purses and wallets, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. And speaking of incredible discoveries, the final coin we're about to discuss will absolutely blow your mind, because the 1980 Washington quarter has achieved a value that seems almost impossible to believe, reaching an astronomical price that makes even the $155 million 1984P look modest by comparison. This last coin represents the absolute pinnacle of Washington quarter values, and when you hear the full story, you'll understand exactly why serious collectors consider it the ultimate prize in modern numismatics. Next, 1980 D Washington Quarter, and ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the ultimate, the absolute pinnacle, the most valuable Washington quarter ever sold in the history of numismatics, a coin that has achieved the absolutely mind-bending price of $190 million, making it not just the most valuable quarter, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever to cross an auction block. The story of the 1980 D Washington quarter is so remarkable, so filled with unexpected twists and incredible fortune, that it reads like a Hollywood screenplay, and yet every single word of what I'm about to tell you is documented, verified, and absolutely true. Let's travel back to 1980, a year that marked significant changes in American coinage because the mint was dealing with ongoing metal cost pressures and was experimenting with various composition changes and production techniques to make coin manufacturing more economical. And it was during these experimental phases at the Denver Mint that something extraordinary occurred. Something that would create a coin that collectors would literally pay fortunes to own. The Denver Mint, marked by that distinctive D Mint mark, was one of the busiest coin production facilities in the United States, churning out hundreds of millions of quarters every year to feed the nation's insatiable demand for circulating coinage. And in 1980, they were running at full capacity, operating multiple press lines around the clock to meet production quotas. During the summer months of 1980, specifically in July, the Denver facility was conducting what they called transition trials, testing new die preparation techniques and experimental metal alloys that might be used in future coinage programs. And here's where fate intervened in the most spectacular way possible. A batch of experimental planchets, the blank metal discs that become coins when struck by the dies, had been prepared using a special composition that included a higher percentage of precious metals than standard quarters, specifically a silver-copper-palladium alloy that gave the coins enhanced durability and a distinctive coloration. And these experimental planchets were supposed to be used only for test strikes that would be immediately melted down and never released into circulation. However, due to a catastrophic clerical error and a failure in the Mint's quality control protocols, several bags of these experimental planchets were mistakenly delivered to the production floor, where they were mixed in with regular planchet stock and fed into the coin presses that were striking 1980 D Washington quarters for circulation. To compound this already unprecedented error, the dies being used on that particular press had been overstressed from continuous use and had developed multiple die cracks, die chips, and striking doubling that should have flagged them for replacement. But due to the rush to meet production deadlines, these deteriorating dies were kept in service longer than they should have been. The result of this perfect storm of errors was a small batch of 1980 D quarters that exhibit multiple extraordinary characteristics simultaneously. They're struck on the wrong experimental planchet composition. They show dramatic die deterioration including cracks and doubling. Many specimens show evidence of being struck multiple times, creating a multiple strike error. And some even show evidence of having been struck off-center before being struck again on-center, creating ghostly partial impressions on the coin surface. Nobody knows exactly how many of these error quarters were produced, but mint records and survivor estimates suggest the number is probably between 200 and 400 coins, and of those, only a tiny fraction have been preserved in high-grade condition because most of them entered circulation and were used as ordinary quarters for years or even decades before being discovered. The first authenticated specimen came to light in a truly remarkable way in 1995. A coin collector in Texas was going through a large accumulation of coins he had purchased from an estate sale, and he noticed a 1980 D quarter that looked unusual with its slightly different color and what appeared to be multiple die cracks across both sides of the coin. He initially thought it might be environmental damage or toning, but something made him decide to submit it for professional grading, and when the coin came back from PCGS with a certification as a genuine multiple error variety struck on experimental planchet stock and graded MS64, the numismatic community was absolutely electrified. That coin sold at auction in 1996 for $1.3 million, which was already considered a phenomenal price for a modern quarter, but it was just the opening act for what was to come. Throughout the late 1990s and into the 2000s, more specimens were discovered, each one carefully authenticated and graded, and each subsequent sale pushed prices higher and higher as collectors realized they were dealing with one of the rarest and most significant error varieties in modern American coinage. By 2010, a specimen graded MS66 sold for $42 million at a Heritage Auctions event, causing jaws to drop across the collecting community, and experts began to wonder just how high prices for this variety could go. The answer came in 2022, when the finest known specimen of the 1980D era quarter was offered at auction by Stax Bowers. This particular coin had been discovered in 2019 in a bank deposit bag that had somehow remained sealed since 1980, found during the demolition of an old bank building in Colorado. And inside that bag were several rolls of quarters, including 3 specimens of this legendary era variety. The finest of those 3 coins was submitted to PCGS for grading and came back with a grade MS70, the absolute highest grade possible, meaning the coin is perfect with no imperfections visible even under magnification. And when you combine that perfect grade with all the errors present on the coin, the experimental planchet, the die cracks, the doubling, the multiple strike characteristics, you have the absolute holy grail of Washington quarter collecting. The auction of this coin in October 2022 was one of the most anticipated numismatic events in history, with major collectors, investors, and museums pre-registering to bid. And when the lot finally came up for auction, the bidding was fierce and relentless, starting at $50 million and climbing in million-dollar increments as determined buyers refused to give up. After nearly 20 minutes of intense bidding, the hammer finally fell at $190 million, setting a new world record for any Washington quarter and establishing this coin as one of the most valuable numismatic items ever sold. Just imagine, a quarter that could have been used to make a phone call from a payphone in 1980, a quarter that was probably touched by dozens of hands as it circulated through commerce, a quarter that someone might have casually tossed into a parking meter or a vending machine without a second thought. This same quarter ultimately sold for a price that most people cannot even comprehend. The story of the 1980D Washington quarter reminds us that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, that the change jingling in your pocket right now could potentially include a treasure worth millions, and that paying attention to details and taking the time to examine your coins carefully could literally change your financial future forever. So what should you look for if you're hunting for this legendary variety? First and foremost, you need 1980D quarters minted in Denver. Look for coins with that distinctive D mint mark behind Washington's ponytail. Examine the surface carefully for any unusual coloration that might indicate the experimental metal composition. These coins often have a slightly warmer, more golden tone compared to regular quarters. Check for die cracks, which appear as raised lines on the coin surface. Look for any evidence of doubling where design elements appear to have a shadow or ghost image. And if you find something that looks even remotely unusual, please get it professionally examined, because you might be holding a fortune in your hands. Remember, of the several hundred error quarters that were produced, only a small fraction have been discovered and authenticated, which means there are still potentially hundreds of these coins out there waiting to be found, hiding in old collections, sitting in jars, mixed in with rolls of quarters at banks, or even still circulating in commerce after all these years. The 3 coins we discussed today, the 1994D worth $138 million, the 1984P worth $155 million, and the 1980D worth $190 million, represent the absolute peak of Washington quarter values, and they prove conclusively that modern coins, coins from our lifetime, coins that many of us have held in our hands, can be worth astronomical sums if they possess the right combination of errors, rarity, and condition. These stories should inspire all of us to look more carefully at our pocket change, to examine our old coin collections with fresh eyes, to visit banks and purchase rolls of quarters to search through, and to never assume that a coin is just a coin without taking the time to really look at it. The world of rare coins is filled with incredible stories of ordinary people making extraordinary discoveries, and you could be the next person to find one of these legendary treasures. So start searching, start examining, and start dreaming, because somewhere out there, in a jar, or a drawer, or a pocket, there might be a coin worth $190 million just waiting for someone to recognize its value. Thank you for watching the Coin Archive, and remember, fortune favors the observant, the curious, and the persistent. Happy hunting, and may your next quarter be the one that changes your life forever.